lucky at a thrift store called Humana Vintage here in Tallinn, and I got 3 of those pieces for €4.50 total. So every piece was €1.50. And all together, not really a look I would go for. Maybe somebody will, but that's not my style really. I like to accentuate some parts of the body. So I'm going to be flipping some of those pieces. Some of the changes are going to be extremely minor, some of them are going to be a bit more drastic, so you'll see. I'll start with the jacket. It's kind of an interesting mixture of a shirt or a jacket because the fabric is a bit more heavyweight. It's just a softer cottony polyester blend. And I really like the color. I like everything about it except those following 2 things. I think that those buttons are cheapening the whole thing out, and I would rather switch them out. And also the length is kind of awkward on me. It hits mid-thigh for me. It doesn't help my proportions at all. So that's the length I'm going to avoid. The reason why I want to cut this bottom section out as well is because I want to stretch this fabric over top of buttons, which I want to place in here. And that's going to be my plan for this little thing. Let's see how it goes.
First of all, I cut off the bottom of the jacket at 16 centimeters all the way around, going right above the slits on the sides. I then pinned the hemline by folding it over itself twice at 2 centimeters and stitched 1 millimeter away from the edge, mimicking the original finishing. I then cut off all of the buttons and cut out little squares from extra fabric that were 3 times as wide as the button itself. Then I hand stitched a circle that was 1.5 times the size of the button and pulled it tight, placing the button inside in the process. In order to secure it, I went through the gathered base multiple times to tighten it even further. And then wrap my thread around multiple times to make a little raised foot. I made a knot, cut the threads off, and cut the ends of the fabric, leaving about 5 millimeters of fabric, which I then burned with matches to prevent from unraveling. You can obviously use a lighter, but I just didn't have it. Be aware that this only works with synthetic fabrics since they melt and leave a plasticky film, whereas natural fibers only burn. When attaching the new buttons to the base, I used a blanket stitch to create a neat edge and have button be stable. To make a blanket stitch, you just poke the needle through the fabric and the button base without pulling it through, wrap the thread around it, and only then pull the needle through and tighten. Again, poke, wrap, pull, tighten. This was the jacket before, and this is it after. It is now the perfect length to tuck into my jeans without adding any extra bulk. The buttons are elevating the look, making it seem more uniform, which I'm very happy with.
So the shirt. I won't really be changing much about it. If those buttons were visible, I would also switch them, but because this blank covers them up, it's going to be okay. The only things I'm going to be changing out are those buttons in here and here. Gold buttons, I don't hate them usually, but because those have a little bit of a texture, they don't really look that good. I'm going to be changing those out for pearl buttons, just because I prefer those, and I feel like they're going to go with this texture a little bit better. Fabric itself, you can see, is a little bit pearly too. Those buttons are going to be less flashy, and those golden ones are a little flashy for my taste personally. This is the shirt before.
And after. There isn't much of a change in the total look, but in the close-up you'll see that the new buttons play well with the pearly shift of the shirt's texture.
So this skirt, it's okay, it's not really great, it's not bad, it's just a good blank canvas. I kind of like the midi length, especially if I'm wearing heels. The only issue is that it's a size bigger than I am. And then it also has a lovely slit on the back, which is usually done on pencil skirts for people to be able to walk. Otherwise, if the pencil skirt was closed and if it wasn't stretchy, making a step would be very difficult. So this is kind of reminiscent of traditional pencil skirts, I believe. So I want to take advantage of it. I would like to gather it in this section. Probably do either a pull or like a fixed gather. Actually, making it a pull would be a bit more appropriate, because if I wanted to wear the skirt as a full length if it's cold outside, then yeah, I'll probably keep it adjustable. So I add a tunneling here to pull it, and then this would gather on the sides, and I don't mind it because I have hip dips and I don't hate them, but sometimes I definitely want to add some bulk around this area. So having some gather around my hip dip would create the illusion of an hourglass figure, and it will give me a pretty high slit, which I enjoy. Because it is 85% wool and 15% acrylic, I'm pretty sure that it's going to shrink if I wash it on a different mode of my washing machine than is meant for wool usually. I'm going to wash it with my other stuff on a more aggressive regime, so I'm thinking maybe it is going to shrink.
So it did somewhat shrink, but it's still too big on my waist, so I'm going to be taking it in the waistband a little. By feeling it, I notice a slight elevation in a section that does not have a seam on the outside, which means that the seam of an elastic is hidden right in there. I'm going to seam rip and pull the waistband from this section to avoid any additional stitches, because the more stitches we have, the more potential rip areas there are. Because my elastic was attached all the way around the perimeter of the waistband, I decided to seam rip a larger section of about 10 centimeters total to distribute the excess fabric more evenly. I tried the skirt on and pinned the necessary amount of excess on both the elastic and the main skirt fabric. Stitched the elastic, burned the edges, stitched it on an open seam to distribute the bulk evenly as well. I took in the fabric, cut it off and imitated overlock finish by again doing the blanket stitch all the way around the raw edge. Now onto the channeling. Luckily, because I have done a bunch of fashion projects, I had a lot of cords to choose from. In the end, I went with a black cotton bias binding to act as the channel and white cotton cord to be the ties inside. If you're going to replicate this, I also suggest you go for a non-slippery cord, because otherwise, when you tie a knot or a bow, it's going to unravel when you walk and that's just going to be very annoying. I tried the skirt on again and put a pin where I wanted the channeling to start. I measured the length of gathered state of the skirt to know how much of my cord is going to peek through when gathered, and the loose state of the skirt to determine the length of the channeling. Then I turned the skirt inside out, pinned my bias along the seam, folding the edges under itself, and stitched the line along the middle. I stitched from the front of my skirt, so my top thread was grey and my bottom thread was black to match the bias binding on the inside. When stitching, you'll notice I looked at the wrong side to see if everything was going smoothly and if I wasn't accidentally sewing over top of the other side of my skirt. Then, because I absolutely despise pulling stuff through the channels, even with a safety pin method, I put a cord inside my channels and pinned it all the way around to stitch the channeling in place and encase the cord simultaneously. If you want to try this as well, be very careful as to not sew over top of your cord, because otherwise it won't gather and you'll have to seam rip it all and start again. I pinned it from both sides, switched my bottom thread to grey and top thread to black, and started sewing about 2mm away from the sides of my bias. And with that, the skirt was done. This is it before and after. I like how it gathers, how it now sits on my waist better, and that it is so versatile. To remove the gathers, I open up the knot, pull the gathers down, make a tiny knot with the little tails of my cord at the bottom, and turn the skirt around. And there you go, 3 simple adjustments to elevate thrifted clothes. Thank you for watching, bye!